If you're an avid thrifter and have some basic sewing skills and you love decorating your space, today's video might just be for you. Stick around. Hi there, I'm Angela, and here on the channel we talk about all things sewing, from garments to home decor to quilting and just about everything I can do with my machines here and a piece of fabric. Today I'm going to share with you guys how I use this stack of inexpensive yet high quality men's dress shirts to beautify my dining room a little bit. Before we jump in, 3 things that you might find helpful. 1, my own accent color throughout my home is navy blue. I decorate with a lot of neutrals, but my accent color is navy. I find it to be very soothing, peaceful, and it kind of goes with everything. 2, we live a very casual life here in our cabin in the woods. That's why I chose a lot of plaids and sort of informal fabrics to do this project with. And 3, you can totally change this up to match your own decor, just simply by choosing different types of fabrics. Keep in mind, you can really only get so much fabric out of one dress shirt, so you might not be able to do too much matchy-matchy. Oh, and one last thing before we jump in. This is a very beginner-friendly, easy sewing project. I'm simply taking a square piece of fabric, folding up the ends, hemming it down, and you can make it even easier and quicker by serging all the edges and just eliminating all the folding and the ironing. This is not meant to be a heavy-duty sewing tutorial. This is such an easy project that you really don't need me to explain to you how to do this in all likelihood. My goal with this is just to show you how you can take an inexpensive thrift find and use it to spruce up your place a little bit. With that, let's get sewing. So when it comes to using these shirts to make napkins, I like to have my napkins sized 18 inches by 18 inches, and if the shirt's large enough, that's usually doable, but you usually, at least in my experience, can only get one napkin out of the shirt, and that's using the back. And what I like to do also, to try to make the very most out of the resources that this shirt has to offer, I also save the buttons from these shirts, because you usually get a decent amount of buttons and they all usually go together. So it's kind of nice to have that as well. But I'm going to start by just cutting the back section out. I'll show you how I do that. I've got it laid out here with the sleeves off to each side, and this is the front sections kind of off to the side. So what I'm looking at is just that back panel here. And I find the side seam, and I just cut right along the side seam all the way up to where it meets. Let me move this iron. I don't need that yet. I cut along the side seam all the way up to where it meets the sleeve, and I'll go along the sleeve section until it meets the back yoke there. I'm going to flip it around for easier access, and then I'll cut right along the back yoke. And most of these shirts will have a little section where it's pleated up here at the center back. You can just cut right across that and it'll open up for you. So I'm cutting along until I get to the other sleeve. Cut along the sleeve seam. Until I get to the other side seam. And now it's just a matter of cutting straight down that other side seam. So I've got my piece here. It's nothing but the center back panel of the shirt. And before I start measuring, cutting, and everything, I want to go ahead and give this a good press. And before I do that, even because this is causing it to be bound up a little bit, I'm going to cut off. I have the seam allowance left on from those sleeves. I'm going to cut that off on each side.
And now I'm going to give it a good press.
So my preference when I'm thinking about size of the napkin is to have a finished napkin that's 18 inches by 18 inches. Sometimes that's not always possible. It depends on the size of the shirt and what you have to work with. So what I want to start out, before I start cutting, I want to do an overall measurement of what I have to work with. And where the sleeves were, there's a curvature, so we lose some width there. So I want to measure starting below that. So from bottom of the sleeve to the other side bottom of the sleeve, I've got almost 28 inches. So that's plenty on that dimension. But looking at the bottom of the shirt, we also have a curvature. So that will impact the size of the intact piece that we can cut out from this. I'm going to flip my shirt piece around to show you what I'm talking about here. So this is where the sleeve was. This is the bottom of the sleeve where it meets the side seam. And this is the bottom hem of the shirt here. If we measure that, we're only looking at 15 inches. So that's definitely not going to be helpful. However, since I have such width of the shirt, I have some room to play with. So let me turn this back around here. And if I'm doing my measurements 20 by 20, it's kind of, I'm sure there is a more scientific way to do this, but what I kind of do is come as far up the shirt as I can towards that neck yoke and make sure I've got 20 by 20. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this using my rotary cutter and my cutting mat so that what I'll be left with is a piece that's 20 inches the length of the shirt. We'll start with that. And this shirt has a built-in plaid to it, and I'm going to try to get my cutting even with the plaid lines, but for this purpose, if it doesn't come out perfectly, I'm not too concerned about it. It's just a napkin. If it were going to be a garment, I would take probably a lot more care on this. I'm placing my ruler as close as I can to where the sleeve opening was, and I'm going to cut a straight line down the whole from top to bottom length of the shirt. Now I've got my straight edge there to work with. And flipping the shirt back around, my next move is to make another straight cut on the opposite side of the shirt, 20 inches away from that starting point. And I don't have a great ruler to be able to do that with, so this part for me, just because of the tools that I have, will be a little bit choppy, I guess. It's not going to be like one straight cut. I'm lining my ruler up along the cut we just made at the 20-inch mark. And I'm going to have to just pretty much make a few cuts, just moving my ruler up. I think there are a number of ways you can do this, that it's just a matter of personal preference. I don't mind doing it this way. Again, because it's just a napkin to be used maybe however many times and then discarded. Precision is not my complete and total goal with this project. I always try to do the best that I can, of course, but it's okay if things aren't perfect. My wise aunt once told me that you strive for perfection in what you do, and although you'll never reach perfection, what you'll get will be pretty good. If you try in your very best, you'll end up with something very good. So kind of lived by those words for my life. Okay. So now, you see this is my bottom hem here, curved. And I've got the shirt from top to bottom. It's 20 inches wide with completely straight edges. So now what I need to do in the other direction is just cut another 20-inch width. So it's simple. It's not the most complicated project in the world by far. I enjoy doing it just because it's a little bit of a palette cleanser. I've been working on some quilts recently, which have been more complicated, so this is a nice little departure from that. It doesn't require too much of me. So here I have the bottom hem of the shirt. I'm just going to cut a straight edge right here, and that'll be the starting point. Now I'll flip it. And I'm going to do the same thing in this direction, just 20 inches. Lining my ruler up at this end. So this shirt was pretty voluminous. It gave me a lot to work with. I don't know what the size of this shirt was. That might be worth looking at because it really does vary. I've done this a few times now and it can really vary. So it's nice to work with a shirt that has plenty of fabric to work with. Okay. That's a pretty decent scrap right there for quilting or what have you, so I will hang on to that. So what I have now is just a 20-inch by 20-inch square, and I'm going to set my iron back up and we'll carry on. I mentioned when we started that I want the finished dimensions of this to be 18 inches by 18 inches. So what I'm going to start by doing to get to that measurement is just to turn over 1 inch on each side and give that a good pressing. And for that, I use my little trusty seam gauge here. I love this thing so much. I'm sure you guys have one too. It's such a common sewing tool. And once again, if it's not perfect, it's not a huge deal. I'll usually kind of start by measuring the inch, and then I just eyeball it the rest of the way. This is such a nice little break from the projects that I've been working on, like the quilts that have been more precision mattered a lot more. And because all shirts don't offer the same amount of fabric, and I have to sometimes make napkins that are smaller than 18 by 18, if this is not perfect 18 by 18, it is truly not a big deal. If you were trying to make a perfect napkin set where everything matched and went together nicely, maybe that would play more of a part for you. But with my situation, it's more of a mix and match type scenario that I have going on with my tablescape and my napkins. So A little bit of wonkiness, fits in perfectly. So now I'm just turning that under by a 1/2 inch, giving it another press. Flip it around, do the other side. And I'm going to get these two sides, they're opposite sides from each other, stitched in place before I work on the other two sides. So now what I have are my two pressed under sides here that are going to be hems. And then this side and this other side towards me are just the raw edges. I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine, get these two sides stitched down. I'll come back and show you how that went. Side stitched. I'll bring this in close to show you that stitching line. And I had sort of a tan colored thread in my machine already. I went ahead and just used that. It doesn't stand out, and you know, it doesn't really, it's not that noticeable because there's already white stripes in the fabric anyway, so it blends in pretty well enough. Okay, I'm just going to do the same thing to the opposing ends right here, and that's it. That's all there is to it. I'm sure you guys have done this probably many times before, and this wasn't really meant to be like, here's how you sew up a square of fabric. It was kind of meant more to be, here's something that I do with my thrift finds, and here is how I'm using my thrift finds to dress up my table a little bit. And as I mentioned, if you have a more formal table situation, you're probably going to want to take a little more care than I have been with these. I live in a cabin in the woods and we're pretty informal around here, so nothing's ever perfect. I do good to keep the mud off the floor from all the gardening activities. Right, back to the machine. I give that a good stitching on each end, and what I want to make sure to do on the ends of these two sides is just give it a couple of back and forths there at each end to secure the stitching there. I'll be right back. So there is my finished napkin, and I think it looks really nice, and I think it's going to go very nicely with all the other blue and white and cream colored plaid napkins that I have going on. I'm going to do the same thing to the other two shirts that I have. And when it's all done, when I'm finished with everything, I will show you what my tablescape looks like now with the new napkins. Before I go, I want to show you what I do as far as saving those buttons. I don't detach each individual button yet. What I do is just cut off this whole strip of the button placket there. I keep the buttons on there, and any of the incidental buttons like on the cuffs, I'll just cut these off, still attached to the fabric. And what that allows me to do is to know, like in my big scrap bag full of buttons, that these all go together. I can see that easily because the fabric is the same. It would be much harder for me to go ahead and take these buttons all off the shirts, and that's a lot of time spent right now. Plus, it would be harder to find all these matching buttons in my big button bag later. So I just keep them attached to the fabric, to at least a small piece of the fabric, enough for me to see at a glance which buttons go together. Be sure to look real closely because there are oftentimes buttons here and there on extra buttons. If you want to save them all, just check the whole shirt pretty closely. Make sure you don't miss any. So I'm working on the cuffs right now. And up around the neckline, you can usually find a button or two. And who knows if I'm ever going to use these or need these, but it's better to have them and they don't take up a whole lot of space rather than just throw them away. So here's what I've got as far as my buttons. I've got the front placket there. I've got the two cuffs, and these buttons also came from the cuffs there. And I think that there was one more from up around the neckline that right there. So I've got a bunch of buttons, and now I can see at a glance that these all go together because the fabric's all the same. And I still have a decent amount of fabric left on this shirt, and what I'll do is to cut it into squares or large rectangles, and just salvage as much as I can, so that way I can maybe use it in a quilt or something later. You never know what you could need it for. But I mean, this comes in really handy for those of us who do quilt. So that's what I'm going to do, scavenge everything I can from this shirt. So I'll catch back up with you here in a moment. And now that I've got those 3 shirts turned into some beautiful napkins, let's take a look at how they turned out and how it looks on my dining room table. Keep in mind, again, we're not formal here. We're very casual, so you'll probably never find like a fancy table layout, but I do still like it to look nice from time to time. Let's take a look. So this is how my table's looking with all the plates kind of set out nicely with each napkin on a plate. So far I have 5 of these napkins. Every time I go thrifting, I look for the perfect shirt that would make a compatible napkin. I'm going to keep growing my little napkin stash here. But this is how it's looking so far. As you can see, I'm one short, but I'll get there. I hope that you found this helpful. A couple more things popped into my mind as I was doing this project that you might find very helpful. One, it's probably best to look for some really sturdy fabrics, nothing too thin or lightweight that's going to wear out with a lot of washings. These are napkins. They're going to get a lot of wash and wear most likely if you're anything like us in our household. So look for some really sturdy fabrics. Not stiff and uncomfortable, but just thicker, and even better with some texture to it. And 2, be sure and give these thrifted fabrics, shirts, whatever you're using, a good wash and dry before doing this project. Anytime I bring a thrifted fabric into my house, whether it's a sheet or a shirt or pants or anything, it gets at least 2 rounds of hot wash and drying on high heat. So just some things to keep in mind. Before we sign off, I would love it if you would leave a comment telling me about your favorite thrifting upcycle. I love the idea of taking a thrifted find and turning it into something totally different, yet still so good and functional. Let me know what projects you've done that with. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me here in my sewing room. I hope you'll come back next time when I have a product review for you. I've mentioned that I'm doing some quilting, and specifically t-shirt quilts, and that needs a good stabilizer on the back of the shirts. And I've been using a product called French Fuse. I'm going to share with you guys how that's working out, a little bit more details about that product. So be sure and come back then. So I'll look forward to seeing you back then, and until then, just keep sewing.